You're listening to Centered. This week, the DNC's Post-Mortem will reportedly skip whether Biden should have run in the first place, and Kamala's messaging. Is that cowardice or just not in their lane? And the firing of Stephen Colbert creates more blowback for CBS and parent company Paramount. And Congress goes on vacation to avoid the Epstein drama, just as new reporting confirms that Donald Trump was told by the Justice Department back in May that he appeared in the Epstein files multiple times. Finally, the passing of Malcolm-Jamal Warner tragically elevates a conversation on the importance of representation in media. I'm Louis Miranda alongside Jeremy Murphy and Carl Meacham. Let's start with new reporting. The DNC's Democratic National Committee's assessment of what went wrong in the 2024 election. They're preparing a post-mortem, and sources appear to be frustrated that that post-mortem is not going to include or is going to avoid questions of whether President Biden should have run for re-election in the first place, and questions about whether Vice President Harris was the right choice, but also whether her messaging was right. And so there's been a ton of criticism. I think one of the interesting dynamics with this is that there's a consistent misunderstanding of what the Democratic National Committee's role is. And it certainly is kind of the representation of what the National Democratic Party is. But the Democratic Party is not any one entity. And I think that's, we've talked about this before. We do not exist in a strong party system in the United States. The parties do not dictate the outcomes beyond Republicans are a little bit better organized and more cohesive. But Democrats, Democrats just don't belong to an organized party. What we have is several committees that organize different things. The DNC's primary role is fundraising for whoever becomes the eventual nominee, and organizing the primary process for a presidential campaign. But they are not really the ones who are out there deciding what the messaging is going to be, because every candidate who comes to the table makes that decision for themselves. How are they going to talk about it? They certainly provide important guidance. They certainly do the early research on opposition research on Republican candidates. It's an important committee that does significant work, but ultimately it's hard for them to do a post-mortem where they analyze whether Joe Biden should have run or not, because the Democratic Party, the DNC, they cannot tell any president not to run. That's just outside of their wheelhouse. They also can't tell other people not to run against him. And there was one primary candidate that ran against him in 2024, a member of Congress who was concerned about the age issue and who is now feeling vindicated in the aftermath of the elections. But at the end of the day, the party can't tell Joe Biden or any other president not to continue running. That is just outside of their purview. So it's a very difficult position that Ken Martin, the current DNC chair, finds himself in, because people not only on the Republican side are going to criticize that, but the Democratic Party has always had that split. When you go further left and, and the Democratic Socialists and then the far progressives who don't like the establishment in the first place, they'll point to it also alongside the Republicans to say, see, the establishment is broken. The establishment is corrupt. The establishment needs to go. And that's where you get the David Hoggs and all those other people who want to primary Democrats. But at the end of the day, the party just doesn't have purview there. And if you're a progressive who does not like the claims that the party interferes and puts their thumb on the scale against a far left candidate, then you also shouldn't want a party that tells a president that they have to get out. Like, at the end of the day, that's the point of primaries, is to let voters decide. And the Democratic Party is supposed to adhere to that. But you'll see the far left make that claim, and it's bogus. I think that Ken Martin is in a terrible situation here, where I think they're going to have to revisit this now that this news has come out ahead of the postmortem. They're going to have to make some statements that address this, and that acknowledges that, frankly, they're just not in a position to be able to tell any candidate not to run.
Doing a post-mortem without the Biden question is like asking Mary Todd Lincoln to review the show. I mean, give me a break. This is that's the prime question here. Like, you can't do one without the big elephant in the room.
Yeah, but there's some questions, and I think the way you've explained it, Luis, is not consistent, obviously, with a Bernie Sanders or how his followers would look at the situation, right?
And that was bullshit too. I mean, Bernie Sanders was allowed to run. He ran a campaign. Look, he wasn't even a Democrat, by the way.
Yeah.
Before that election, he was an independent, and he was hesitant to run as a Democrat because he didn't want to be a Democrat. He's come a long way because he's actually, I think, much more fiercely working with the Democratic Party today than he probably ever has in his career.
Yeah.
But he was allowed to run. He ran a spirited campaign. The claims of interference were largely misinformation and disinformation driven by the WikiLeaks and the same interference that is at question in Trump's accusation that Obama carried some kind of hoax. That was Russian interference. And so, again, if you claim that you don't want the party to interfere, then you can't expect the party to tell establishment Democrats to either retire early or to not run again. That is a function of the democratic process where that's what primaries exist for. That's what voting exists for. Now, the problem is that once someone is an incumbent, it's hard to push them out, which is why so many, septuagenarians and octogenarians end up staying in Congress, because it is hard to replace them. And that's a problem we have to solve for. But the party we just don't have a strong party system in this.
No, but I think the best example that supports your view is Clinton Obama. Because sure. Clinton was definitely the strong one. She was definitely the favored one of the establishment when Obama came and beat her.
And he ran as an anti-establishment character who criticized the party at the time. Also, right. I will say that Barack Obama's criticisms of the Democratic Party then were as ridiculous as Bernie Sanders.
Well, but I'm just saying your thesis holds because Obama was able to beat sort of the establishment party. And that's what you're saying. And then he became the establishment. But the issues that are highlighted in this post-mortem are baloney. I mean, and I don't think that they're going forward in the right direction. I mean, okay, Biden, if he should have run, or how Kamala's message failed, okay, that's the past. Obviously, it didn't work. Let's move on. Let's figure out what are the issues that Americans care about, and what are Democrats speaking to, and what are they not speaking to.
But that gets to what Kamala was talking about. I think that is well within the DNC's purview, is to say, like, hey, look, we've done a lot of focus groups and spoken to voters, and obviously we saw the results of 2024. A contrast between democracy and fascism didn't work in the context of 2024. I think it's important to caveat that it might work better now when we're actually seeing an authoritarian type government that is telling the courts to go fuck you and ignoring their orders. That's very different now than in 2024, when you didn't have that example. So, what didn't work in 2024 might work better now when you actually have a authoritarian style leaning towards fascism type of approach to governing playing out in our screens every single day, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that's part of it, but I also think that the Democratic Party needs to be very broad in how it goes about this process, and not just stick to, blue states and heavily blue portions of the country. I mean, there is an appeal that Donald Trump has been able to tap into that goes beyond demographics. And the Democratic Party has been so focused on coalitions, that being, the labor side, the ethnic side, or sexual diversity, and has not spent the time I think it needs in finding sort of, that broad umbrella message that speaks to the American condition. I think that Donald Trump was able to speak to the outsider conversation in this country, and just, people are just let down by the system. Those things, I think Democrats, they're capable of doing this. It's not like they're not capable, but they need to really focus on the why someone would pick Donald Trump, especially from their sort of constituency. I mean, how many Blacks, how many Latinos, how many women the Democrats lose in this election?
And that's a fascinating point. Simone Sanders, who's over at MSNBC with their nightly news program there, and she was the press secretary for Kamala Harris while she was vice president for a period. She made a very good comment, which is, the campaign was out there spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on advertising on this Las Vegas sphere, but yet they didn't put money into holding a town hall in Black and brown neighborhoods that ultimately ended up where Democrats lost a ton of ground to Donald Trump, of all people. You're talking about losing Black and brown voters to the most racist man to have run for the White House since I don't know, Strom Thurmond, who
But Luis, I'm
maybe.
going to push you on that. I think that's the mistake. I don't think it's about tailoring a message to Black and brown. I think that what Donald Trump,
but at least showing up and reaching out.
But what Donald Trump found, that there was a message that hit all of it,
and
it was this dissatisfaction with the system.
Oh, but they reached out directly too. The Trump administration reached out directly, did things with barber shops. I mean, there were all kinds of things. I remember,
yes, and the things that were trending on our Instagrams and all our feeds, I think was again something that was very effective. But they did find this dissatisfaction with the system, and the narrative that he created was that he was the solution, and talked about problems that every American had, lower middle class, white, Black, brown, it didn't matter. And I think that's something that Democrats really need to focus on, not tailoring it just to Blacks. Or now you're going to find Democrats going to white neighborhoods or lower middle class white areas.
Well,
I think
they should.
Too.
They should. The Democratic Party's anti-whiteness should be part of this post-mortem. The Democratic Party's anti-white maleness needs to be part of this post-mortem.
I agree. But the messaging does not have to be so narrow. There's things that people have in common.
Sure.
And I think
everybody has economic concerns, and kitchen table issues are the bread and butter of the Democratic Party. And there's a lot that cuts across there, because at the end of the day, a lot of the frustration is fueled by, the economic populism that drove Sanders and Trump is fueled by opportunity, the difficulty of people getting jobs now, even when they have college degrees. A lot of people are regretting that they got college degrees. So you're right, Carl. There is plenty that can be done to look at issues that cut across. But I think Simone Sanders is right in saying that the party neglected its base voters and could have invested more there instead of, dumping hundreds of thousands of dollars a day on the Las Vegas sphere. That's definitely true. And so the party should be looking at that as part of its postmortem. They can certainly make recommendations about spending. They do raise a significant amount of money for whoever the nominee ends up being. So they should be able to say something. And then here's the crazy part. The people briefed on the report's progress are saying that the report is going to focus more on outside groups and super PACs. That's ridiculous, because again, you definitely need some kind of section that discusses those aspects, but you've got to focus on your own house. This report, I think, is going to have a lot to criticize. It doesn't matter how well they do it now. They've opened themselves up. There's a lot of discontent, and I feel for Ken Martin and his folks. This is not going to go easily, and hopefully they revisit some of these things and reconsider, because if they don't touch on some of this stuff to explain why it's not part of their role, it'll be a very big missed opportunity. So. All right, well, let's turn to CBS and its firing of Stephen Colbert. A lot of conspiracy theory building there as well about the capitulation of CBS parent company Paramount. Jeremy, break this one down for us.
Yeah, so CBS is in hot water again. They just can't get around this. They settled the Trump lawsuit for $16 million, plus I think he's saying that he's getting another $30 million or $20 million in PSA time for what? I don't know. PSA and Donald Trump is kind of, they don't go together, because he has never done anything to help anybody but himself. Now, CBS has announced they're canceling the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and they're saying it is a financial decision. but the timing is coincidental to the Trump lawsuit, and Colbert has not been shy about going after Trump. It is a daily a slugfest, and so the theory or a conspiracy theory, if you will, is that was part of the quid pro quo of the deal, that they were going to also cancel Colbert. The timing is a little fishy, but what I will say is, having worked at CBS for 14 years, um, it does sound like a rational business decision. The late night ad market is cratered. The demographics are in the tubes. People are not staying up watching. Either they're not home, or they're watching streaming, or they're in bed. So the late night model has kind of crashed. And if this was a quid quo pro, Colbert wouldn't be on until next May. I mean, they gave him a year.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't have happened, because if it was part of a deal, they would want him off now.
Well, I think that's exactly right, because the way that it's worked is not going to be good if you're supporting the Trump side.
Right.
Because Colbert every night now is just going to rail against anything that Donald Trump does. And
yeah,
he's
and
already
I can
started
tell
doing
you,
it. Huh?
And I can tell you, having been at CBS, these aren't just whims. To take a show off and to basically abandon a day part, a time slot without your affiliates, it doesn't happen. So clearly CBS cleared this. They have 219 affiliates across the country. This was not done in the dark. They obviously sought guidance from their affiliates, because again, they are removing a part of their schedule, and that the affiliates are dependent on. Because Jay Leno used to do plugs for news, or they would cross promote each other. So to me, it was obviously a business decision. It probably could have been done a little less clumsy to avoid it being part of this conspiracy theory, but I don't think it holds water. And what's going on right now at CBS is part of Paramount, and Paramount is trying to merge with Skydance, and that needs the FCC approval on it, and that was Trump's leverage.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's just weird that it happens to the highest rating nightly show. That's what's, I think, bizarre to a lot of people. The Colbert Show was the best one at that time slot, and I think if you are, again, and this is also based on whatever assumptions you have, right? If you're assuming that they're out to get Colbert and that it's a political issue, you're going to say that this doesn't square. The timing is bizarre, though. If they saw this coming, and if nobody's watching these shows, this gave them sort of an excuse to cut it, but they didn't get ahead of the narrative that had developed. And now, again, the same way that we're talking about Epstein and the conspiracy world on the right, how it's just spiraling, is the same thing that you're seeing from the left.
I think that's the best part of this, is that we're like on opposite sides of the conspiracies here, Jeremy, because I'm trying to debunk the broader conspiracy on the Epstein. Certainly Trump has some issues there. And you're debunking the conspiracy on Colbert, where I feel very strongly that this is a gift to Trump. And I don't disagree with you that there are market dynamics that have changed, because I think one of the problems with late night is not that the model doesn't work. It's that the way that people consume it has changed. I think people aren't watching at night because, lifestyles have shifted. It's just a different environment, but they're watching the hell out of those shows on social media.
Yeah, but they don't get money from, it's pennies to dollars. And that's a problem. And, I was really surprised. First of all, I think the timing of this was very clumsy. I think they could have done a better job.
Yeah.
But I was also surprised at the cost of doing this show. And Colbert was making something like $20 million a year for a show that, maybe got a couple 100,000 viewers in the 18 to 49. That's a lot of money to pay for a very little audience.
But Jeremy, don't you think that the model shift here is just going to go to the sort of to the Bill Maher kind of approach, where you have it on HBO and it's once a week, I think, and you watch it whenever you want.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
and not just HBO. I mean, the streaming giants have all the space to do this.
The thing is, CBS is, their financial model is still the affiliate system. So, they put something on that the affiliates have. Well, if they want to monetize it on YouTube or something else, they have to go back to the affiliates and get their permission for that. So it's a very old system. They're handcuffed in a lot of ways that Bill Maher and streamings are not. So I do think you're going to see the dominoes fall. I think NBC and ABC are going to look really hard at their late night, and there's going to be a recalculus of how do we make money off this, because once viewers leave a certain day part, they don't come back.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to be able to get that mass audience that they used to, for Carson and Letterman.
Yeah.
Those people aren't coming back. So they're going to have to figure out, okay, how do we make money on this? And if we're not, we're just going to go the CBS route and just abandon the whole time slot.
Yeah, Carson. I mean, geez.
Carson.
I mean, that was a different time. I remember being a little kid and my dad he'd watch it religiously.
Yep.
But that was sort of the thing that we couldn't watch because, we were little kids and they said things.
Yep. Well, I remember Jay Leno during the O.J. Simpson trial. He had the dancing Edos, and and America watched. Right. I mean that show used to get like 3 or 4 million viewers a night. Now these shows are lucky if they get 1 million.
Yeah. But Jeremy, that's in support of your sober analysis, which I think is very good, and certainly from the many years you spent in the television industry, you understand this better than any of us. But I think that's exactly the same thing that's happening on daytime, or nightly news, and also daytime news, frankly, but also cable news.
Yeah.
And you see we talked about the Terry Moran firing when it happened, and that was also part of the calculation there. It was an easy excuse for them to unload someone that they were paying significantly more than the new business model really justifies.
It reminds me of, whenever there's a writer strike or a actor strike, and people talk about the devastation between the studios and the actors, whatever, studios and networks like strikes because they use something called force majeure to get out of all the contracts they don't want. So sometimes these things are good for, these are businesses. They're not there thinking of Joe Q. Public and how do we make him happy? No, they're thinking about how do we make money? And it all comes down to the dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that, I wish I had an envelope that I could just raise here and lift up and make an educated guess about who the next domino to drop will be.
Yeah.
I would say it's I think it's ABC. I think it's Kimmel.
Yeah, I can see that.
Last.
I think NBC treats the Tonight Show as an institution, and I think they're going to keep it, but they'll probably try to refine it so it's still profitable.
Yeah.
But we, just in fairness, we've seen this play out, right? We saw Carson, what it was to, I guess, our parents. There's Letterman. You mentioned Leno as well, Jeremy. Arsenio Hall. I remember that. That was like, a new thing and, breaking ground there. And then Conan. And Conan was, I think Conan's a contemporary. I think he was doing crazy shit. And it was very sort of alternative-y, but you've seen sort of the arc play out, and now it's just plain redundant.
Yeah.
And
I think Fallon has a lot of creativity on his show, to be fair. I think Jimmy Fallon is arguably the best of the late night hosts, in my opinion, because he has added so much creativity.
Mm-hmm.
He's brought on different types of guests and given platforms to new types of artists in different communities. He participates in skits with them. He does like quiz shows with them. He does competitions.
But the institution, Luis, I mean, he's maybe he's Carson 2.0 because Carson used to do the same crap, and it was hilarious.
I just think he does it better. I was, Carson was really before I was really paying attention to late night. But I was a Letterman fan when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I never understood Conan O'Brien. I think I'd get him a little bit better now. I watched his Kennedy Center Honors, and I think I have a little bit of a better appreciation for him. But I just never understood Conan, and I think Fallon's got a great grasp on the public. So hopefully he survives a little bit longer. But I think it's not just late night. It's just this whole model where digital consumption is killing local media. It's killing nightly news. It's killing even cable news. And you're going to see the consequences of that in the coming weeks. I mean, NBC is spinning off MSNBC because they just don't want to deal with it anymore. It'll be interesting to see what their coverage looks like when they suddenly lose all of the credibility of NBC's reporting. And not just credibility, but just the substance of that NBC reporting as they become this new entity that houses just MSNBC and other assets. It's really fascinating. So, Jeremy, thank you for your expertise on that one.
Thank you.
And looking to moments that shaped the way that people see themselves in the media. Carl, we've been exchanging a lot of messages on the passing of Malcolm-Jamal Warner and what he meant to an entire generation. But I think people forget. Like it's been interesting to see that on the one hand, there's been a huge focus, if you're of a certain age, on his passing, and yet so many people don't even know who he is or the Cosby Show, or only remember Bill Cosby now for his later court trials. But for you and for me and for people of that generation who grew up watching the Cosby Show, for me it was just a fun show to watch. But for so many, it was representation in a way that had been missing from mainstream television up to that point.
Oh, for sure. And you did have other shows that were trying to make a point in society. You had Archie Bunker and All in the Family, right? You had kind of shows that were making a social point, right? But this was a different kind of show. The Cosby Show was portraying a successful Black family, right? With love, with humor, with the challenges that any American family could recognize. And that was what was so revolutionary about it, right? It wasn't a family that was poor in a bad neighborhood and, they were coping with, difficulty. It was a well-off show or a well-off family. And I think for a lot of Americans, that was already sort of something that, surprised them because I think there wasn't as much crossing as far as friendships, right? But then you start to see that the same things that were happening in the Huxtables were the same things that were happening in other families, the Smiths or whomever, white families, Latino families, Jewish families, right? They had the same problems. Their parents had the same angst. And then you had this character that we're talking about with Malcolm-Jamal Warner, right? And Theo. And Theo, to me, was I was the same age. So the struggles, the conversations, the clashes that he had with his dad in particular, and the way that they were resolved were very, they were consistent with the life that we were living at the time. Obviously, now, as you've mentioned, Luis, the Cosby Show and Bill Cosby is remembered in a different way. But I think a lot of folks at the time, let's not forget, he was America's dad. Everybody sort of looked up to Bill Cosby.
He wasn't just America's dad. He was also, he was Fat Albert.
Fat Albert.
That's right. And so we shouldn't sort of forget that part. I think that's why a lot of people are looking back at this with a lot of nostalgia. It's so sad the way the guy died. I think he was with his daughter in Costa Rica, and there was the wrong kind of current.
They were just swimming.
Yeah. And they saved the daughter.
A surfer saved the daughter. We had a surfer on a couple weeks ago A surfer jumped in and was able to pull her out and bring her to shore on his board.
That's right.
And unfortunately, rescuers couldn't get to Malcolm-Jamal Warner in time. Really
You know,
tragic.
I think, Carl, you hit on it. What I loved about that show was, Bill Cosby was a doctor, Felicia Rashad was a lawyer, but they didn't bang you over the head with it. It was just what mom and dad did,
That's right.
and they lived in this very nice area, I think in Brooklyn Heights, in a town, and it was just normal.
Yep.
And they didn't make it a socioeconomic thing. It was just kind of the backdrop. And also, it's sad because when we were talking about George Wendt, who played Norm on Cheers, we really touched on the communal experience going away, and the country watching the same thing at once and having something to talk about the next day.
Yep.
And those things don't exist anymore, absent like a Super Bowl or an award show. There's so much content, and you can watch it when you want, where you want. And we're just not watching the same thing. And so we don't have a lot of commonalities anymore.
Yeah, but it wasn't this thing, Jeremy. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It wasn't a black family. It was just a family that happened to be black.
No, I think that's right. Yeah. And I think, for some, when I was growing up, I don't think I understood that. Yeah. I didn't get that. And the way to explain that to younger generations is, my kids were young enough when Barack Obama went to the White House that it's not unusual or unique for them to see a black man as the president of the United States. Before him, you had the guy from 24, the Jack Bauer's president.
Dennis Haysbert. Yeah.
Dennis Haysbert.
That's right.
Who went on to make insurance commercials. But he was a credible face that I think kind of, showed it. You had the black president in The Fifth Element.
Right.
Zeus. But you didn't have someone who you could credibly say, look, there's been a black president in the White House. But to this generation, the generations who grew up after Barack Obama has been president, that is normal, and as it should be, right? And to me, growing up in that time period, I didn't realize that it was new or unique to see a black family on television.
Neither did I.
Right. And I didn't necessarily distinguish between the Jeffersons and the Cosbys. To me, it was just a fun time. And, watching that half-hour sitcom, whether it was the Jeffersons or the Cosbys, all the same was seeing another family and seeing their life and their struggles and their laughter and their good times, and not really thinking of it that way. But you could have that as a communal experience. I think the communal experience, unfortunately, has fractured us more because... a lot of people, black people, which watch black shows, Hispanic people will watch Hispanic shows, white people will watch country shows. And that's unfortunate because I do feel like that gave us a sense that, hey, we're all in this together and we're all pretty similar.
I think Jeremy and Luis, I think you put your finger on it. This sort of stratified reality that we're in right now, some of it might have to do with social media, and that you can pick what you're going to watch, and to such a nuance, right, that you can narrow it down completely. You don't have to deal with the world around you at all. And I think that what we had at the time that we grew up was sort of a catch-all. And I think you had a situation like the Cosby Show that a critical mass of Americans on Thursday night were going to watch, because if it was good, they're going to watch it, right? And what it did, and I didn't see it this way either, Luis, at the time, was it just made everything much more easier for people to digest, that these are just people like you. They, as you said, Jeremy, they weren't ramming it down your throat. They just lived. And sometimes, another thing is, if you think about it, it wasn't trying to be a mixed show either.
Yeah.
Yep.
It wasn't like there was a lot of white people or whatever, or non-black people on it either. So it wasn't making an effort to be okay with the white people. It was just people living. That's it. Which I think now it becomes very difficult because everybody's trying to peg all of these different labels and do it right for whomever.
And they had the spinoff where Theo and his friends went to college.
That's right.
Oh, that was a different world. That's where
That's right.
Lisa Bonet.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
But you know what? The communal experience, it's gone. And the
Yeah.
last time I can remember a drama or comedy was, I want to think like 2009 during Mad Men, when Don Draper, John Hamm, confessed to his wife that he actually taken someone else's identity. And in Manhattan, you can hear a pin drop.
Dude, I wasn't done that
everybody-
season yet.
I can't remember the last time I watched something on broadcast television. And
I'm only
someone
now
else
catching
watched
up on
it.
Mad Men, so this is news to me.
Oh, I'm a huge fan. That's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's gone, and it's sad.
Yeah.
Because that's what, you can go to the water cooler, you could like be in a bar or something and mention something that someone else saw that someone else can talk about.
Yeah.
Now our lives are on our phones, and we
Totally.
don't even look at who's sitting next to us. And even if we do, we don't know anything. We have nothing to connect with that person.
But do you make the mistake, Jeremy, sometimes that you think that your whatever thread or the things that you're getting in your social media are things that other people are getting too? And then you sort of realize, no, this is because I've looked at X, Y, or Z, and that they're feeding me more of it. So this is my own private world.
But
I'm convinced that
there's the opposite of that, Carl, which is that the people I know are getting the same things because we're all in the same bubble.
Well, I think Facebook really hates me. They think I'm a horrible person because in my stream, it's like teeth whitening and get a car and shampoo. And it's like, there's nothing like helping people. There's nothing.
Wow.
It's all like crass consumerism.
Well, the smile looks great, Jeremy, so you're doing all right. And now let's go to the Wall Street Journal's new reporting that Attorney General Pam Bondi briefed Donald Trump back in May that he appeared in the Epstein files multiple times, and that the Justice Department would not publish any other files because they contained, images of children and information that could identify victims. The Wall Street Journal continues to break arguably the most serious stories that hurt Trump with his base and that show that his behavior and arrogance in the way that has been so dismissive of his base is just unwarranted, but understandable as we see more of this information trickle out. So, just to clarify what we said last week, Jeremy, you're sold on the government conspiracy. I spoke about how there's no actual client list. There never has been, but clearly the investigation into Epstein did include information on other people who may have participated or may have been in some way adjacent to the activities that Epstein was carrying out. And Donald Trump was a good friend of Epstein's for many years. So we can't entirely discount that. But that's different from like a broader government conspiracy to conceal a pedophile ring. And I think that's an important distinction, that Trump had a relationship with Epstein, has had a history of really ugly, egregious comments, and in the way he handled, whether it was his beauty pageants or just his friendship with Epstein. And those are separate things. And there was a terrific podcast that Ross Stout had led at the New York Times with the reporter who originally broke the Epstein story and whose investigative journalism led to this case really blowing wide open in the first place and Epstein getting arrested again. That is worth listening to. So we're going to go ahead and link to that to make sure that folks are tracking it, because it's just so valuable and so important to understand all of those other pieces. That's different from saying that the QAnon and broader Epstein conspiracies are real, but that's what's at the debate, at the center of this debate, and that is creating so much tension, is that every little drip essentially just reiterates why people have so many concerns about this.
I mean, is anybody really surprised that this man might be included in more files? I mean, I thought that was a given. I mean, Epstein was friends with every scumbag, and they're all over these files. So I'm really shocked that this is shocking to people. And I think Trump, what you see is him threatening to put Obama in jail now, and going after Brennan and Comey, and I think he's really freaking out now. And
I call it the Russia hoax.
Yeah. And this is him throwing anything against the wall to get, other people to, to look elsewhere. But, and in pointing Biondi and Bongiorno and Kash Patel, you would think he would have calculated this. Okay, these are people who are desperate, who have been, selling this Epstein conspiracy. And, the bill was going to come, and like they were going to have to produce. So I'm surprised that Trump appointed them knowing this.
If Trump had nothing to hide, then the release of the files should just happen. I mean, and then let's just move on. Instead, we're just we're watching Congress. Congress has left for the year, right? They come back in September. I think they left a little earlier than what they'd hoped. They're going to go back to their districts. They're going to have town hall meetings, and they think that the town hall meetings aren't going to be sort of zeroing in and focused on Epstein. I don't know what they're thinking. It's going to be nuts.
And the drip is just terrible. And every piece of information that comes out, because some of it is what the Wall Street Journal is credibly reporting, and then there's other stuff that's just made its way on social media now of old photos and videos and comments, Donald Trump's comments from the Howard Stern show that are being taken, in all fairness, slightly out of context, but that just make him look terrible. It's really ugly and gross.
I mean, he said he was going to expose the elite. That's what this whole thing was about. He promised sunlight. And, the more this drags on, the more people are just going to believe, as you're saying, Jeremy, that he's just protecting himself. That's all he's doing. And, now you have a series of things happening, and the DOJ meeting with Maxwell. I think it's happening today. And then she's going to figure out what she's going to say. Everyone's thinking that there's a pardon that the administration is holding up. This Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is Trump's personal lawyer or former personal lawyer. So, this is adding more just bizarreness to this whole situation.
And going after Rupert Murdoch, I think is the dumbest thing, because he's met his foe. I mean, Rupert is the ultimate pragmatist, and like Trump, he really doesn't have any ideology except money. And and the Wall Street Journal is probably one of the most credible news organizations. Despite the fact that he owns it, I think it's a testament to him as a businessman that he let them kind of be the Wall Street Journal and didn't try to turn it into the Daily Mail or the New York Post. And for Trump to deny, they had this sketch, and for Trump to say he's never sketched before, and then they found 4 others. I mean, they're not going to back up on this. I mean, if you think Murdoch, Fox News, they called Arizona. They're not his lapdog, and especially the Journal. So I'm really surprised that Trump didn't just let it go, and he kind of poured gasoline on the fire with that one.
Yeah, well, they're suing. Carl, you're right. Todd Blanche was known for representing the president during the 2024 criminal trial in New York City. And the fact that he's playing a central role there is probably not the smartest thing from just an optics perspective either. It looks like a cover-up, but for MAGA people listening, it's a cover-up by President Trump and his people. Here's the thing that I think is important for people to understand. When Congress gets back into town in September, this will still be an issue, and it's going to be an issue because there are enough Republicans who are feeling the heat from the base who are going to side with Democrats. And to their credit, Democrats have been able to help keep this going. But you're going to see Republicans, as we saw in the House Oversight Committee, which actually voted to subpoena the records with appropriate redactions to protect victims in particular. But that they release them to the committee. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be out publicly. They'll be released to the committee. Nonetheless, we all know how Congress leaks. So that should provide certainly a lot of tension and issues to cover come September. So, the majority in the House may have thought that this was a good punt, but they're going to end up right in the same place where they started, or worse, because more revelations will have come out by then that will be damaging, and then they'll be just, I think, drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, there's an effort by, I'm just reading this. There's an effort by Senator Wyden, who's calling on the Department of Justice to investigate $1.5 billion in suspicious financial transactions linked to Jeffrey Epstein. This is stuff that they can do without any kind of legal process. This is information that the Treasury Department has, and this would add, I think, more understanding or more transparency, because it would identify the folks that did these transfers. And if the president doesn't have anything to hide, this would be a way to show who was doing what. I think transparency would probably also restore sort of public trust, and stop the speculation. This is all conspiracy. This is this dark hole of conspiracy that just gets worse by the day. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's the president who's feeding it.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm surprised at the clumsiness in this. They were caught flat-footed in this. No one did the calculus on this, and it keeps getting worse. And these people are just reading from different playbooks. And I'm just shocked that this has reached this fever point, because a coordinated White House would not have let this get that far.
Well, but again, it's, when you start with a lie, you're going to then have to make up another lie to cover up the first lie, and you're just going to get deeper and deeper in that rabbit hole, and that's what we're seeing.
But you keep on hearing more and more, Luis. You keep on hearing from Republicans. They're like, why didn't you release the information when you were in the White House, when Biden was in the White House, right? And it just seems to me like the whole orientation of the two parties is so different. I don't think Biden was sitting around trying to figure out ways to screw the other side. I think Biden was trying to figure out other ways to govern.
Well, that's the thing, is that the Democrats, when they are in power, respect the separation of investigations and justice and the different branches, or if you get a court order, you listen to that court order, you abide by it. Look, another podcast that we'll have to link to is this Wednesday's Daily from the New York Times, featured the whistleblower that was fired because he was concerned about the way that the Justice Department was seemingly lying to the courts. And on top of that, that they were basically told that they're going to have to tell the courts, fuck you, so that they could continue to deport people to El Salvador, to third countries, and kind of pretend that they hadn't heard. They basically told him, this is what came out in that podcast, that he should stop sending emails because they didn't want a paper record, so that they could pretend that ICE never got guidance that they never produced, so that they could continue to do those third-party deportation flights.
Yeah, so that's like the revisionism. But my point there is that a lot of folks felt that Democrats weren't going to support transparency when it comes to Epstein because of alleged friendships, activity that might implicate Democrats, most notably Bill Clinton. So that's their orientation. Their orientation is that Democrats are also stuck in this, or that Democrats didn't want to release this information when they could have, because it would have implicated one of their own. That's not where Democrats are. And I don't think that's where American people are. I think American people, first of all, this feeds the whole conspiracy game. But most importantly, American people want to get along and deal with the problems that they have. They want to, they want solutions to problems. And this whole thing that we're in really takes away from solving those big problems that Americans supposedly voted for Trump, felt that he could do a better job dealing with. We're not addressing the problems. We're dealing with scandals. That's all we're doing.
My prediction is everybody's going down on this except Trump. Trump is going to survive this. But Pam, Bargiorno, Kash Patel, anybody who touches this is going to get singed except Trump.
Thanks for another great show, guys.
Absolutely.
Really thought this was a great conversation. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Our panel featured Louis Miranda, former Obama White House communications advisor and former spokesperson at DHS, Carl Meacham, former Clinton appointee and a former senior Republican staff on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and Jeremy Murphy, former CBS executive, author, and publicist.